The 1989 Lions were losing the series, so in the second test, they started a fight. Deliberately. In the first minute, it changed everything, and Australia have never forgiven it. The Lions in Australia, 1-0 down after being outplayed in the first test. Everything rides on Ballymore, and from the very first scrum, it's obvious the Lions have made a decision. This will not be a rugby match, it will be a confrontation. The first half explodes into violence, punches at every breakdown. Australia's scrum half Nick Farr-Jones ends up brawling with his opposite number Robert Jones, almost from the kickoff. Jones had stamped on his foot at the first scrum, and it detonates from there. One massive Lions forward after another piles in. The Australian press christens it the Battle of Ballymore and brands the Lions thugs. One writer calls it the most violent match seen in Australia. And here's the uncomfortable part. It works. Australia are rattled, the Lions win the test, then take the decider, helped by a horror error from a young David Campese. Series 1, 2-1. The comeback is legend in Britain. In Australia, it's remembered very differently, as the tour where the Lions punched their way back into a series they were losing. No sightings that mattered, no suspensions of consequence. The instigators became legends. Australian players fumed about it for decades. Farr-Jones said if that's what it took, they could keep it. The Lions never apologised, they just took the trophy home. This wasn't even a test match. It was one of the ugliest attacks in British and Irish Lions history.
Would be a yellow card. 15 then just held him down, continued on with a number of punches to the head.
So what's your recommendation?
Red card against number 15 blue.
The year was 2001 and the Lions were playing a midweek tour match against the New South Wales Waratahs. Ireland fly half Ronan O'Gara, just 24 years old at the time, went to ground after a rug. Then chaos erupted. Waratahs back Duncan McRae stood over him and unleashed a barrage of punches. Around 11 blows in roughly 10 seconds, with O'Gara lying on the turf and barely able to defend himself. By the time it was over, O'Gara needed 8 stitches beneath his eye. McRae was immediately shown a red card and later received a 7-week suspension. He has always insisted O'Gara elbowed him twice beforehand, but even many who accepted there was some provocation felt the response went far beyond the line. More than 2 decades later, it's still one of the most shocking and replayed incidents in Lions history. Matt Dawson came within hours of being thrown off a British and Irish Lions tour in disgrace. The year was 2001 and the Lions were in Australia. Dawson had just been dropped for the opening test against the Wallabies and he wasn't happy. Instead of keeping his frustrations behind closed doors, he wrote a newspaper diary for the Daily Telegraph that was published on the morning of the match. In the column, Dawson questioned head coach Graham Henry's leadership, saying he didn't inspire him and criticising the tour environment as overly strict and regimented. Unsurprisingly, the article caused chaos inside the Lions camp. Management felt Dawson had publicly undermined the coaches at the worst possible moment just hours before the biggest game of the tour. After the test, team manager Donald Lenihan reportedly pulled Dawson aside and told him he was being sent home. But before the decision became final, Lions captain Martin Johnson intervened. Johnson admitted Dawson had crossed the line, but argued that sending him home would do more damage to the squad than keeping him. His influence proved decisive. Dawson stayed on tour, but not without punishment. He was fined £5,000, the exact amount the Daily Telegraph had paid him for the article. More than 2 decades later, it remains one of the biggest media scandals ever to erupt from inside a Lions camp. A rugby stamp turned into a courtroom drama that overshadowed almost an entire Lions series. The year was 2013. The British and Irish Lions were taking on Australia in Brisbane in the opening test. Just 3 minutes into the match, Alan Wynne Jones was left bleeding after a ruck. Television replays appeared to show Wallabies captain James Horwill bringing his boot down onto Jones's head. Jones needed stitches, and the incident immediately became the biggest talking point of the tour. Horwill was cited and hauled before a disciplinary hearing, with many expecting Australia's captain to miss the next test. Instead, he was cleared. The judicial officer ruled there wasn't enough evidence to prove, on the balance of probabilities, that Horwill had intentionally stamped on Jones. But the story didn't end there. World Rugby took the extraordinary step of appealing the decision against its own disciplinary process, something almost unheard of at the time. The appeal dominated headlines throughout the week leading into the second test, before Horwill was cleared once again. Even then, the controversy refused to disappear, with debate continuing right up until the series decider in Sydney. For much of the tour, the biggest story wasn't the rugby, it was whether Australia's captain should even have been on the field. The Lions eventually won the series 2-1, but the Horwill case remains one of the most controversial disciplinary sagas in Lions history. The night before the biggest match of the tour, a Lions player called his opponent a plank in a national newspaper. What happened next helped sink the whole tour. This is the Healey column, 2001. The Lions in Australia, series level at 1-1, everything riding on the final test. The camp is already fracturing, brutal training, leaked unhappiness, players openly miserable. Into this walks Austin Healey, England scrum half, winger, wind-up merchant, and owner of rugby's fastest mouth. Healey has a ghost-written newspaper column back home. and on the eve of the deciding test, it lands like a hand grenade. In it, Australia's giant second row, Justin Harrison, is called a plank. The whole country gets both barrels. The night before the decider, Australia's dressing room couldn't have written better motivation themselves, and the punchline is almost too perfect. In the final minutes of the deciding test, with the Lions attacking to win the series, the ball is stolen by Justin Harrison, the plank. The series dies in his hands. The fallout is vicious. Healey, who didn't even play in that test through injury, gets fined. His ghostwriter later suggests the spiciest lines weren't even Healey's own words. The tour management brand it a betrayal. Teammates are split between fury and finding it hilarious. It follows Healey for the rest of his career. One column, one plank. The Lions wouldn't win a series for another 12 years. This is the series where a player got away with an eye gouge, on camera. The year was 2009. The British and Irish Lions were in South Africa for one of the most physical test series rugby has ever seen. Just over a minute into the second test, Springbok flanker Schalk Burger reached for Luke Fitzgerald's face and appeared to gouge his eye. The referee's punishment? Just a yellow card, 10 minutes in the sin bin. Burger was later banned for 8 weeks by the citing commissioner, but the damage had already been done. He returned to the field, played almost the entire match, and South Africa went on to win. But that wasn't the only major controversy. Later in the same test, Bakkies Botha charged into Adam Jones at a ruck with the ball nowhere near either player. Jones's shoulder was dislocated instantly, ending his Lions tour. Botha received only a 2-week suspension. As the series went on, tensions only grew. The Springboks were ferociously physical, but many Lions players, pundits and supporters felt they repeatedly crossed the line. There was a growing belief that South Africa could push the limits of legality, dish out huge shots, and let the citing commissioner sort it out afterwards. To many watching, it almost felt as though they had a license to do whatever it took to win. The Lions eventually lost the series 2-1, despite producing some outstanding rugby, and many still believe the physical battle was officiated too leniently. More than 15 years later, it remains one of the most brutal and controversial test series the Lions have ever played. A yellow card for an eye gouge, 2 weeks for ending a tour. Were the Springboks protected, or was it simply a different era?